Hi there, this is Derek Weldon. This is my personal channel. I'm the director of Pacific Coast Auto, and so this is our question cast where you get to know me a little bit better. You can ask me anything that you want about personal life, living in Japan, owning a business, or about my company in particular, Pacific Coast Auto. So, we got the questions from the comment section. If you want to ask a question, feel free to. You can ask me anything that you want, no matter how stupid it sounds, and I'll see if I can get to that question for the next cast. So let's start right away.
Ryan Hatzenbach has 3 questions. Number 1, are most of the cars sold at auction road ready, even if they have an R-grade rating? What I mean is, do they run, drive, and are for the most part safe for the road?
Okay, pardon me for mincing the words there while I was saying the sentence. Sometimes I have a difficult time saying what's in my mind. And so, are the R-grade cars good, drivable cars? Yes, for the most part. If the vehicles aren't drivable, they have to go into the auction in a separate section with no inspection at all. And so all of the cars that have the inspection, even the R-grade cars, they are drivable. They might have some serious problems, but they should be mentioned in the auction sheet. So for example, if the engine makes some noise, if there's rust holes in it, if the transmission is noisy, if it can't shift properly, these should all be mentioned. But for the most part, nearly every car has no problems and is drivable. Here in Japan, the car has to get inspected every 2 years and anything that's broken fixed, and so that keeps the general condition of the cars rather good.
Are some of them literally pushed into the photo booth?
That was kind of the rest of that question. They don't push any cars into the photo booth. If the cars are not running or no inspection, they take the pictures outside of the auction booth, and so that's a good way to tell if the car is running or not.
2, how did you learn to read and speak Japanese, and can you recommend any programs other than going back to school to help me learn?
This isn't a very good question for me to answer because I'm probably the worst person in the world at speaking Japanese, considering the fact that I've been here for almost 9 years. Although I can speak Japanese, and I speak Japanese for my company, my vocabulary and my grammar is very limited, especially compared to even someone who has been studying it for about 2 or 3 years living here in Japan. If you want to learn how to speak Japanese, there are a couple of things that you can do. Certainly you can study vocabulary on an iPhone. There are programs and apps for that, or an Android if that's what you use. However, those programs don't really help you to learn how to speak better. The best way, and pretty much the only way to learn how to speak Japanese well, is to make friends that are Japanese and speak with them. And this is really easy because now we have the internet, and there are lots of groups that you can go and meet Japanese people. They usually have them at the universities, and even if you're not a student, you can kind of join in. Or, you know, there's a lot of places where you can find somebody. Worst comes to worst, you can pay and take Japanese lessons to speak with someone. But I think probably the best way to learn is to just hang out with people that are Japanese and learn from them. This is how I've learned most of my Japanese, and even though I don't have a lot of time because I'm always working, that's still how I get most of my speaking in.
And then number 3, when you visit the auctions, how is it that anyone can keep their sanity with the convenience store door chime constantly ringing in the background? Just watching the YouTube videos is enough to drive me mad.
Yeah, so when you're at the auctions, every time an auction starts and every time an auction ends, it will say it's starting. You'll actually hear it go, "E stato!" like that, which means line A is starting. It's actually kind of funny to listen to, and a lot of people make comments about it. But to be honest, if you're actually at the auction, your brain automatically tunes that out. But you can't do that while you're watching the videos over YouTube, because you're just watching the video for a short amount of time, and you hear all of the audio coming in. Your brain is less able to tune out certain sections of audio while you're listening to it coming out of your speakers. So I don't even really notice it after I've been there for a few minutes. And it's funny because whenever I bring a customer there, they're like, haha, that's so funny, it keeps saying that. And up until they mentioned that, I don't even listen to it. I don't hear it.
Tim Enzenauer says, you talked about how newer Skylines for the R32 are going up in price, even if they can't go to the US yet. the same for all cars? Say in a couple of years, the 1993 Supra can be imported into the USA. Will that jack up the price for the 95 and the 96 model?
This is a really good question and a really complicated answer. And unfortunately, it's an answer that we can't really do anything except for speculate about. And so what's happened is the R32 Skyline is now importable into the States. And so all these ones that you can bring into the States have gone up in price like crazy. And then the Japanese market was like, oh, hold on a second, prices are going up. All of our cars are leaving Japan. Man, we're going to start bouncing the price up for all of the ones that can't even be imported to the US because we're afraid that the stock is going to get low. And, you know, a lot of people, especially dealers, use average prices from auctions as well for what price that they bid and what price they set the reserves for. And so there is some effect there. But I think most of it is just very simple supply and demand. And it's really difficult because every car has a separate amount of demand and supply. The amount of Skylines that were built are very different from the amount of Supras that were built. And the demand for Skylines at one time is going to be different from the demand of Supras. And so every car is going to have a completely different mix about how the prices are going to be affected once the US ones are importable. And so my prediction for this, and I don't even know if I'm going to be right about this, but what we're seeing now is the Supra RZ the Supra RZ is going up in value at the moment. And it's because they're kind of running out of good ones. But it's not going up in value very quickly at the moment. It is rather gradual. In the last 2 years, we've seen an addition of about 20%, which is, I mean, it's quantifiable, but it's not substantial. And when they're importable to the US, it's going to raise the price of the other ones as well, I think. Mostly the ones, I mean, there are two separate versions. There's the 93 to 96, which is the slower engine version, and then there's the 97 to I think 2001, and those ones are the faster version of the engine with a VVTi or variable valve timing. They get better gas mileage and they're faster, and they're just overall better and cost more. And so you might see the price increase only for those ones, you might not. It really depends. And so this is a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but it's really difficult to predict something like that. And so every car is different. There are some cars that don't increase in price whatsoever as they get old, and some cars skyrocket like crazy. Some cars get a really low value when they're about 15 to 25 years old, and because the value is so low and there's no demand for them in Japan, the price is almost nothing, and these cars get bought up by exporters and sent out of the country. And then if you're looking for one of those cars that used to be a popular car, 25 years after the fact, it's become not findable whatsoever. I mean, nowhere. Once a year they'll come up, and it's so weird to see something like that happen. And especially like if you're from another country and you don't really understand that this is what happens in Japan. Japan is a huge used car export market. And in your country, 20 to 25-year-old cars, there are probably plenty of every model there. But you compare that to Japan where they're all gone. It's just really strange. It's like a ghost town of cars. And so yeah, the reason why I was laughing at the RZ, I had a comment on one of my videos, and probably nobody saw this because I had to just erase it. Somebody called me a douchebag because I pronounced it RZ instead of RZ. And he's like, he was being kind of an idiot in the way that he was saying this. And then I left him a comment that said, I'm sorry, we're in Japan, and in Japan this car is called the RZ. That's how you pronounce it. It's like if you pronounce it in Japanese, it would be Supra RZ is how you pronounce it. And I'm from Canada, and in Canada we say Z, we don't say Z. The same thing in Australia and the UK, but in the US they say Z instead of Z. And there's nothing wrong with this, it's just something that's different. But this person wanted to attack me for saying RZ instead of RZ. So I kindly said, you know, in Japan we say it this way. I'm not really as much of a douchebag as you think I am. And then a couple of other people kind of jumped on it and attacked this person for attacking me, and then he got angry and there was a lot of swearing going on, and so I erased it all. And so life of being an exporter, I guess. Kind of a weird circumstance, but it is YouTube, and YouTube comments can be a little bit like that sometimes.
John Blissett says, "Hi Derek, congratulations on the little one.
Thanks.
I have a question for your next video. What are your thoughts on the Mazda RX-7 FD? I've watched your other videos and I see that you like the cars, but what is your opinion on them for an export potential? And your pricing, particularly to the UK?"
All right, yeah, okay, so the FD is a fantastic car. I absolutely love the car. And if you watched my other video, which was the FD versus the NA1 NSX, I was a little bit hard on the car because the NSX was amazing, like super amazing. And the FD is a great car, and it is super beautiful. It is one of the best looking cars that I can think of, and it takes body kits well, which is not always the case for all cars, and it takes wheels well, and it takes tacky, huge spoilers well, no matter what you could throw at it. Wide body kits it looks good on. Modified, stock, they're all super awesome. They drive well, look good, sound good, and they have the rotary engine, which makes, I guess it leads us to the question that the person was asking, are they a good car for importing? To be honest, we haven't sold a lot of them, maybe 2 or 3 of them. These cars and some of the other cars come with an instant warning. Like, for example, the Austin Mini comes with a warning that it's probably rusty. And the R32 Skyline comes with a warning it's probably rusty and it's going to cost you too much. The RX-7, the warning is that these engines unpredictably break. And there isn't anything you can do about it. And it happens more often than any other car. Not only that, but the car engine has a way of flooding itself if it's not taken care of properly, i.e. brought up to operating temperature before shut off. And it has to do with the rotary and being a little bit of a quirky thing. I think the engine is fantastic. I think that it's great to drive. I think it's thirsty, but to some people that's not really a problem. But are they really a good car to buy? The answer is yes, if you don't mind the risk. And if you're one of those people who doesn't like risk, then probably not. But here's the thing with the RX-7, there's a huge price difference between the low mileage ones and the high mileage ones. And that's because they're so unpredictable. Any of the ones that are over about 120,000 kilometers are really cheap. They're in the range of 200,000 to 400,000 yen. Any of the ones that are kind of like 80,000 yen and less, they're really, really expensive. They're about 800,000 to 1.4 million yen. And so if you go for a lower mileage one, you're assuming less risk. But if you go for a higher mileage one, you can get a really good price on one of them. And if it comes down to the fact that you have to do an engine swap on it or rebuild the engine, that might be a reasonable price to pay for that car, because it is an awesome car, and you just have to accept the fact that every once in a while the engine's going to stop working. And if you can accept that, you can be a happy RX-7 owner. Now, there are a lot of people who drive RX-7s and they swear by the reliability of them. And those engines can be very reliable. But the thing is, they have to be taken care of properly. You never really know if cars are taken care of properly. And so if you get a car and you take care of it, they can last a really good long time. You have to be careful about the oil though, because a lot of people don't realize this, especially if they've never owned a rotary before, but the engine consumes oil. Like, you have to put oil into a special tank, and it, just like gasoline, it can run out of oil. And modern engines don't do that. People think that as long as you change your oil, you should be fine. But the RX-7 is not like that. It runs out of oil, and if it does, it is very, very bad for the engine. So even 30,000 kilometer ones can be bad in that regard.
X7 Rock says, "Can I submit a resume? Your job sounds fun."
Okay, so the job is really fun, but the job is also an awful lot of work, and it's very meticulous, repetitive work in some areas. And so although cars is my thing and I absolutely love this job, it's not a job for everyone, because you have to work long hours. I work basically 8 in the morning until midnight every day. Also, you have to do the same things over and over again. There are a lot of people from, I probably shouldn't say this, but there are a lot of people from the USA and only the USA that call me at 3 o'clock in the morning and wake me up. And to be honest, it happened this morning. Not so bad. I did get a call at 11 o'clock from someone from Texas last night, and I got a call from someone from California this morning at 6 in the morning. And usually I don't take those phone calls. They just wake me up and annoy me a little bit. But this one in the morning, I tried to turn the phone off, but I accidentally answered it. And because I was sleepy, I was probably a little bit rude to the person on the phone. I'm sorry if you're watching. And so yeah, there is that. You get, we get 10 or 15 emails per week probably of people who say, hey, how much is a Supra? And we can't answer that question without knowing what country that you live in, so we can tell you how much it costs to send it there and the import costs. And so things like this can be annoying, and you have to have a high tolerance for the same thing happening over and over again. And the reason why this happens more for the US than any other country, that could be debatable, but the US is a brand new market for imports, and they don't know very much of these questions automatically. Many people in the US don't even know that the cars have to be 25 years old, and that's why you always see in the comment section for my regular channel, how much is this for the US? And then you'll see me come in and say it's not 25 years old, so you can't import it. And so because there's this lack of understanding and lack of knowledge of the industry at this point, it'll get better over time as more experience with importing comes into play. This is a brand new baby market at the moment. It'll get better. And so, yeah, I mean, the job has pluses and minuses. The big plus is that this is my job and I get to do what I want. And this is really important for me because I don't like to do things the way most companies do. I used to have sales position jobs, and sales position jobs, they force you to make sales that are going to make those customers unhappy. And I absolutely hated that. I always had great sales numbers, but I was always pushed to sell more, and I disagree with that. And so I don't call myself a sales person in this job. In fact, we have more customers than we can handle at the moment, so I don't really need to be looking for more sales or trying to close sales. I like people to be happy with the purchases that they get, and so I prefer to be on the less pushy side, so to speak.
Says, we have 2 kids as well, and we want a 3rd child, and our current 2001 Subaru Outback just won't do. What should I get?
Okay, I changed that question a little bit. It was a little bit longer, and I changed it so that it sounded like he was asking, what should I get? Because that makes the question a little bit easier to answer. And this is a good question to ask right now because I've got 3 kids, and I've got a Legacy, and a Legacy is the exact same on the inside as an Outback. And so he actually said, is a Forester okay? I don't think it's wide enough for 3 car seats in the back, to be honest. And so you have a choice. You can either go with a 2-row that's very wide, and you can do this with something I actually mentioned in the comments, a Porsche Cayenne could do. If you're looking for Japanese, a little bit more difficult because most Japanese vehicles are rather narrow. You could do pretty much any large American car. You might be able to get away with a Japanese Crown or JZX 100, Chaser, Mark II, SEMA, Laurel. These larger cars probably could, but if you're going to be like me, then you're going to get a van. And so we're looking for a van right now. The options at the moment are El Grande, which is big and has lots of space in it. Toyota Alphard, which is basically the exact same thing but made by Toyota. Honda Ellison is one. It competes with those ones. It's a little bit smaller, but Hondas are fantastic. Super reliable, super great feeling engines, and some good looks, but that's subjective. I don't know what we're going to get. It just hasn't fallen into my lap yet, but it might. You might want to try an FJ Cruiser. That would be good. Oh, a Toyota that could fit your 3 kids is any Land Cruiser. And the Land Cruiser 90 actually has 8 seats, whereas most Land Cruisers are 5-seaters. The Land Cruiser 90 has a 90 series, which is the Land Cruiser Prado, which is a lower grade, and a diesel will cost you about 1,000,000 yen, and a gasoline you could probably get for somewhere around 400,000 yen, because nobody wants gasoline for some reason. That's probably a pretty good pick for you, because Land Cruisers are awesome. And Land Cruiser 60s are all in bad shape. Land Cruiser 80s are kind of all in bad shape, but you pay a lot for the off-road ability, and I don't know if that's worth it for you. Land Cruisers 100s are getting pretty expensive, I would say, to 1.5 million maybe. And so, yeah. Next question. Maybe one of those is good. I don't know.
Chapakawa, this is the final question. Chapakawa says, "Hi Derek, if I was living in Japan and wanted to buy cars privately from the owners instead of from the dealers or the auctions, is it easy to sort out the paperwork for exporting that car? Or can you only export cars purchased from dealers and auctions?"
Good question. In Japan, people don't sell their cars privately. It almost never happens. And for example, like in Canada, if you open up the classifieds, you'll see hundreds of classifieds. You go on Kijiji or Craigslist, you'll see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them, thousands maybe. But in Japan, nobody does that because everybody wants to buy from a dealer, because Japanese people have some things that make them a little bit strange. And it sounds like I'm being racist, but the culture is very different in certain ways, and some things just make you scratch your head and go, wow, what is wrong with people? The general way you buy a car in Japan is you pay like an extra $1,000 to pay for a dealer to register your car for you, when the regular person can register their car in like 15 minutes. And so, I don't know. It's beyond me. But part of the nice thing about Japan having crazy, weird things in their culture is that it leaves opportunity for exporters to come in and start companies like mine. And so I can't complain. And is it easy to do the paperwork? Pretty much. Yeah, the paperwork's pretty easy. If you can speak Japanese, you can just go to the office and you can ask them how to do it. We can buy from a friend and export a car. No problem with that. If you came to Japan and you wanted to do the paperwork for that, then certainly you could do that too. If you wanted to export your own car, that's possible, but it's a little bit challenging to do because you have to go through the same steps that we did when starting the company in finding an agent that can ship the car for you and making sure that you prep the car properly, or finding an agent that knows how to prep the car properly. And so it's a bit challenging. What you can do is, if for example you're in the UK and you want to bring the car back to Japan, contact a freight forwarder in the UK. Contact a whole bunch of them, write the same email and send it to 10 of them and say, hey, I got a car in Japan and I want to send it to the UK. Can you help me? And then they probably can set it up with their Japanese contacts. There are a couple of companies in Japan that export cars for personal people. I don't know how much that costs, but you can do it in English, and so that might be an option. And this person actually, there's more to this question, so let me just get to it.
I ask this as there are so many gems in Japan that are sitting around, so I want to go on a scavenger hunt.
This is funny because if you go to the outskirts of the big cities or the rural areas, you'll see tons of awesome old cars that are just sitting there, rotting away in fields. And you go and knock on the door and you say, hey, can I buy your car? And like 99% of the time, they'll say no. And then if you live in Japan, you'll see the same car 5 years later, hasn't moved, still has a tarp over it, and the person still says no. This is kind of famous if you're on Facebook with a bunch of people who live in Japan, because you'll see this all the time. People will post pictures of abandoned cars and say, yeah, this guy won't sell me this car. And the sad thing is, some of these cars are awesome cars. It happens all the time to like Toyota 86s. It happens to like the TE27 Corollas, old Civics. All these awesome cars are just sitting there, and it's really frustrating to just see them sit there. That being said, the idea of coming to Japan trying to buy some of these cars, that sounds awesome. And that's something that I would love to do. Just drive around until you find cars that you're interested in and knock on the door and offer some cash in hand and see if anyone would take it. I can't think of anything that would be more fun than that. And with that, we're going to end the podcast. This isn't the podcast. We're going to end the YouTube cast. I don't know if that's what you call it. But that's going to be the end. Write your questions in the comments section, and hopefully this one didn't cut off at the end, because we're having troubles with that, it seems like. All right, thanks a lot for watching, and have a good one.